Hello and welcome to Insightful Adventuring. I wanted to come on today to talk about a little bit different of a topic. It goes along with some of my other topics, but this is actually something that didn't happen on the trail or out on an adventure, but I was actually doing a client call and I wanted to speak to this because I think it's a common question people have, and it centers around messages, signals, signs that people might pick up on or hear, but they're not quite sure what they are all about. What my client said to me was, I see the signals or the signs, but I don't know what they mean. And I want to come on here first to say it's okay to not know what they mean. Sometimes we don't know what they mean right away. Maybe it comes to us in a week or a year later. We sometimes just don't know until we look back and we're like, that's what that was trying to say to us. It isn't until we practice and we really put an emphasis on learning some of our more inner thoughts and value and like do some gratitude work and really start to work on ourselves and our higher up chakras, where we start to tap into our intuition more and our insights, and we really start to hone in more of what those mean. So at first, it's okay if you don't know. It's actually something that I would say is very, very common. And there's still to this day sometimes where I see something and I just say, "Oh, that was great. It was nice to see that creature come by, and maybe it meant something, maybe it didn't." My biggest example is like red-tailed hawks when I'm driving. I oftentimes see red-tailed hawks when I'm driving, and I take that as a sign of my dad um, being there as a protector, but also just kind of saying hi. Sometimes I see deer on the trail. I saw deer a lot after my dad passed away when I was out doing a training for a marathon. So whenever I'm doing something more intense, like a hike or a run or something like that, and a deer comes by, I have kind of put that into the bucket of my dad, kind of supporting my more the effort that I'm putting in around physical activity. Recently, I was at a town not far from where I live. I had gone there for the day to explore. And there was a lot of antique shops, but also like some gift shops and things like that. And I went into a store and I saw a train magazine that is something that my dad used to collect. He had so many of them that we had to try to figure out how to get rid of them after. But it's not a train magazine you see regularly. It's like an older train magazine that's not really around anymore. And right when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, hi, Dad. Cool." I took a picture that I'm going to share with my sister and brother because I thought it was kind of a cool thing to see. But then today, when I was thinking about this podcast, YouTube episode, I was thinking about that and seeing that as a sign, and I instantly heard, "You're on the right path." So I realized that, like, that seeing that was my dad tapping in. And then today I got to hear the message of what he wanted to share with me, of that I've made the right choice. I'm going in the right direction. I'm heading to where I'm supposed to be heading. So again, it didn't happen right away. It was almost a week later that I got the message, but I want you to know that it's okay if you don't know right away. Um, but there's some techniques you can do to try to learn more about how to be in those moments, to kind of hear them, understand them. Oftentimes, for me, physical things are very different than the messages I hear. For me, signs that I see are more of if I see a butterfly, I'm like, oh, transformation. What may I be doing for transformation recently? So they're more concrete things that like characters, like creatures for me, when I see something, like I was seeing turkey vultures for a while and I just look those up. So when it comes to animals that I don't see regularly and I start to see more, I just look them up. Honestly, I use the internet for what it's for all that that's good for. I do have a book on animal speak, so I might look up in that book what the animals mean if I see something that's a little bit more anything physical. I just look it up. It's more the messages I get while I'm on the trail that I dissect more. So if I hear a statement that comes through, I will write it down. I spend a lot of time writing when I'm out on the trail. And oftentimes, when I say writing, I actually mean dictating, and I'm dictating into my notes app. I do a lot of times just dictating notes. Why do I do this? Because I always have a notebook with me, but it's in my backpack, and I don't want to take off all the gear to grab my notebook. And I also don't have a spot where I want to carry it with me on my body because I need to have flexibility going over like the trees and the rocks and things like that. Um, Going through water, like rivers and like streams, things like that. I don't want it to be on my body because I want to keep it safe in a spot where I can pull it out at nighttime. So I use my notes on my phone often, and I will just dictate into them. So when I'm walking, I hear a message, I write it, I put it in there. Last couple of times I've gone out hiking, it's been all around the book that I'm supposed to be writing. And so I'm going to be starting to work on that. I know if I don't do it right away, it's going to be something that's going to be going towards somebody else. If it's put out there for you, it's a possibility and it's already in fruition for you, getting ready for you to take it and go with it. So when I get those messages, again, they're usually not in the most convenient times. I have my notes when I'm just out hiking. I can easily open that up. When I'm driving, I can't open those up as much. So usually when I'm driving, I will kind of keep it in mind. And then when I get to a place, if it's something really big, like a message for somebody else that I really want to make sure I get right, I will pull over at the nearest pullover and write it down in a notebook or in my notes so I can make sure I share it. That happened one day. I was in the middle of nowhere. I think it was like North Dakota. And I don't even remember. It was somewhere up northern, I would say North Dakota. And I got a message for an old coworker. And I quickly pulled over, wrote it down, and made sure to follow up with her later in the day to see if she wanted that message. And so those kind of things, like I was on the trail, I got a message for my more current coworker and asked her if she wanted it. She wanted it. For that, I wrote it down because it was a long, long message that I downloaded. And so I made sure I took my notes app out and I just talked into it for everything I said, and it just came out. So I think the biggest thing is sometimes the messages just sound like your voice. So you might be like, "Oh, I'm just talking to myself, or I'm just thinking about stuff and it's coming up and all of those pieces. If it comes into your head and it seems like it's important, take note of it. If you're in the shower, get bathtub crayons if you want, if a lot of stuff comes to you in the shower. I was getting ready for a client a couple weeks ago, and I knew she was coming on later that day. And I was thinking about kind of what I should know because I always try to download things before I meet with my clients anyway. And I got a lot of information when I was in the shower. Nowhere, I don't have bathtub crayons. So I just kept it in my head and I don't take long showers and just came out quickly and wrote it down in my notebook. So that way it was ready for her. So those kind of things, like they don't come at the most convenient times. But having techniques in place where you can either talk into an app, write it down, pull over and write it down, keep it in your head for a short amount of time and just keep restating it. The nice thing of if you keep it in your head for a little bit and you keep talking it through a little bit more comes. So with that information for that client, I heard one piece and then I was replaying it and even more came in. And so it did become a full story in my head for me to then share with her. So if you're hearing something that you're like, tell me more, and then you're like replaying it in your head, more might come for you in that moment. And so, and again, if you're writing it down, also revisit it. If you're not hearing any messages right away, say you see something and you're like, I wonder what that means. And you ask and you get nothing, then revisit it and say, oh, I saw that necklace that really jumped out at me. And what does that mean? Where's that coming from? And it might not come at that moment, but it might come later on. You might say, oh my gosh, I just realized that is almost identical to the necklace that my mom had. or might be identical to like something you saw previously in another place. And it's a message of like you revisiting that location or some of that stuff that you dealt with in there, that location. So nothing's a coincidence. I went through some tough times here in Yosemite, with some relationships with friends. And I know it was completely for me to then process some of the stuff I never processed as a child, with friendships. So really looking at things in that way, like, how can I revisit this? What does this mean? Is it something that I'm supposed to like definitely deal with? So I made a big decision recently in my life of my next steps. And for me, it was very much of I know I've made the right decision. Hearing from like that message that I got this morning from my dad confirmed it, even though I already know it's the right decision. But I'm also reminded of it regularly in my life. And so even though I know I've made the decision and this is happening, the universe wants to make sure I don't go back on this decision. And so it will continue to remind me. And I actually said the other day, I'm like, I get it. I know I'm going. I got it. But I know it's going to continue because until I make the actual step, because there's free will in it, it's going to keep reminding me. But it's also been dropping some other things that have been happening of me questioning timing or what it's gonna look like 100%. So I just wanted to leave it at that of like you want to like look at it in many different like ways. You might see the signal and you might have to wait a little bit. You might get it later in the day. You might have to process it a little bit, or it might come right away. Remember, it might sound like your voice, but write it down or process it, think about it. If you see something and you're like, oh, I wonder what that means, and you hear something in your head instantly, take note of that. And the last thing I will say is also think about before you saw that, what were you thinking right before it? Or before that message came down and you downloaded that message, what came right before that? A lot of times it's harder to remember what became before because your brain is just going, especially if you're driving, you might be thinking about so many different things. But it's just like dreams. If you wake up at 3 a.m., a lot of times the dream that happened right before that time is an important dream to remember if you can. So being able to think about what happened right before and then also taking what might happen next. So those are my tips for you along signs, signals, and messages. And let me know if you have any questions. If you've had experience with this and want to share as well, feel free. Everybody's experience is different. And the other thing I want to say is it takes practice. This isn't something where all of a sudden you're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to be like, oh, I'm downloading all this information. But if you practice it, if you believe it's happening, more messages will come, more of the downloads will be there, those insights. And no matter what, I get the most when I'm outside in nature. So when I'm sitting here in my apartment, I don't really get that many downloads. If I ask for them, I will. I will get downloads for other people when I'm here. But for things that are about my life and what I need to do, I have to be out and about. So a lot of times it doesn't even come when I'm driving as much. It's really when I'm out and about and I'm either in nature or I'm exploring a new town or I'm in a space of like something very different for me. And I don't know what that exactly is all about, but I do know that nature is I know why I get them in nature. So I don't know where the train one came out. Like that was something that that whole day was represented by my dad for many different reasons. There were some other things that happened that I was just like, yep, he's here. He is excited I'm taking this day off too. So with that, I will leave you with that. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe, leave some feedback if you would like, and I hope you have a beautiful day and thanks for tuning in. Take care.